The main reason why I play Rise of Kingdoms is the community and the people that I've met. So I wanted to make a series to record the conversations that I have and edit them to share it to you guys. So yeah, this is what this is. I had a conversation with the war leads in terms of what commanders I should invest in, and it went into the commander philosophies and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Also, we are fast approaching the Mountain Warfare goals, so if you guys could hit that subscribe button, we need 45 more subscribers to max Mountain Warfare in 2 days. So if you guys enjoy it, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you around. Hello, I got my war leads in this call right now. I'm honored to be blessed with the presence with Pro and Nikki.
Hey, I'm Pro. I am first and foremost Ploto's friend. We've been together since 1873, my first kingdom. And in 68, I am one of the war leads and the resident data nerd.
I'm Nikki. I've been with Pluto also since 1873, and in 2268, I'm the head ward lead.
If you guys didn't know, I'm kind of gold head heavy right now. My general thing is I don't invest gold heads unless it's right before a pass opening. So KVK 4 passes when they open, that's why when I use up all my gold heads and my materials and that kind of stuff. So on Wednesday, actually, on the 31st, I'm planning on streaming, and I have 1.5k gold heads. And I was wondering, like, what commanders should I invest in, and what are the best meta pairs? Let's start off with that.
In terms of open field, I definitely recommend everyone use the current gen of commanders. For example, Boudica, Nevsky, and Scipio, if we're going to invest in anybody, because they're for sure going to be a long-term investment option.
Okay, so what do you mean by long-term investment option?
What I mean by that is the upcoming generation of commanders are going to pair nicely with those three. The next archers, for example, paired really well with Boudica.
So you're saying like the new generation of commanders are really new and they're really strong, so they're going to last longer than, say, investing in older generations such as, like, I don't know, like YSG.
Well, first of all, I think just in general, you always want to be looking at the latest gen of commanders, latest generation, latest cycle, just because Lilith implements a power creep when introducing new commanders into the game. And something that I'd say that most people would agree on is that, with this current generation, starting from Nevsky, and then now we're going to have our new leadership commanders coming up, that power creep has kind of been taken to the next level. I think the jump in Boudica, Scipio, and Nevsky in comparison to their older counterparts has been, it's been a pretty significant leap. These commanders all have really premium debuffs, which is just really important to have in the open field. And on top of that, have great nukes. Skill damage is the meta in open field, and they have other utility as well, and other and also pretty good survivability. So these are just in general just amazing commanders. And like Nikki was saying, Lilith also tends to introduce each new generation of commanders a commander, I think usually in each cycle for each troop type, a commander that pairs well with the previous generation commander. So like Nevsky pairs well with XY, and
with William.
Yeah, with William. When you're investing in a commander, you really want to think about utility in the present, but also just longevity, because you can only max so many commanders every year, and why max a commander that you can only use for 1 KVK or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So talking from experience, like, how do you guys go about maxing commanders and choosing what commanders to invest in?
Yeah. I mean, I think I follow a pretty similar strategy as you do, where I really wait until that last moment before in KVK, before that like zone 5 opening. Pretty much just until the very last point, until where I really need to be fighting a lot for an extended period of time to make my investments, just because you really want to see how the meta is evolving and what new commanders are becoming relevant and what new commanders are becoming irrelevant. I had a good idea of what commanders were good and what pairings were good, and that's what I tend to think about is what pairings are good and can be used in the immediate, and then what commanders will have that longevity. So it's kind of like two-pronged. Let's say you invest in a Nevsky, and your only other Cav commander, legendary max, is a Khan. Right now you're trotting out a Nevsky Khan into the open field, and it's really just not as good as if you thought about the pairing and you invested in William and Nevsky at the same time, and now you have top meta open field March.
So it's kind of like, instead of looking at each commander in its own space, it's kind of like how it fits into your collection and how they co-collaborate with each other within your murder ball to make those marches.
Exactly. I mean, you're not fighting with just one commander in the open field, right? You're you're fighting with, first of all, in pairs, and then also in with multiple marches. So you have to think about all of them. It's not one commander in a vacuum.
I guess the next topic that we could talk about is that's how we invest in commanders, but what commanders should, for example, what should I invest in?
It's always a little tenuous to invest in a commander, right before the newest generation is going to come out. And leadership should come out, I'd say, in the next 2 to 4 weeks, and then 3 months after that, Cav. I would say, if there is any Cav commander that would be on its way out of kind of relevancy, out of the ones that you're investing in, it would be XY first, just because I think, there's already kind of the prevailing notion that XY is a bit of a class cannon, like he wreaks havoc on the field, but, he costs you a lot of resources. I think the utility of Nevsky and William are just going to make them better long-term commanders than XY. But I mean, overall, I think your composition is almost as good as it can get, as far as like the marches you have, right? Guan Scipio is the single best infantry march in the game, and I would argue the single best open field march in the game. I think Boudica YSG is a great march for me, and maybe this is also advice for you as well, is that I'm gonna be saving enough heads just for leadership cycle comes midway through our KVK. If there is like an extremely good leadership commander, and I think Lilith has already confirmed like a Joan Prime. I don't know if we can trust them, but I think they confirmed it. If that leadership commander is as good as the current gen commanders have been, then I think that's a commander that you would want in your murder ball.
In a perfect situation, 5 march murder ball, like what should your marches, how many should be DPS, how many should be support, how many should be infantry, cavalry, archers, like what do you think is the best?
I think the perfect ratio would be 4 DPS and 1 support, and now 1 support march being Trajan and Ethelflaed. You can opt for 2 archers or 2 cavalry and then 1 infantry. You're gonna have an XY primary and a Nevsky primary. You're gonna have a Boudica or a Nebu as your 1 or 2 archer marches as primaries, and you're gonna have Guan. That's my perfect 5 march. Like when you're making your murder ball, you want to consider like what each commander is doing, like the debuffs they're giving and the buffs that they're giving. And generally speaking, you want all bases covered. So like, you want someone that makes the target take increased skill damage. You want someone that debuffs their health, their defense, and their attack. You want all those boxes checked when you're making your murder ball to be the most effective as possible in the open field.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nikki. When thinking about kind of murder ball composition, I think you definitely want to be thinking as far as just the commanders and marches rather than troop type specific. I think most people are running like heavy archer open field marches, or like the whales were, right? Because that was kind of the meta at the time, that archer marches were just better in open field. And I think there is an element of like, like you have a city skin that specializes in one troop type and gives buffs to that while taking away the other troop type buffs. But I think just because of how good, like how much better the current gen commanders are in relation to other commanders, that you really shouldn't be taking consideration city skin buffs into your march composition, and really just investing in the best in class, right? And like we've said, and like every content creator is going to say, is your best in class is going to be Scipio, Boudica, Nevsky, and then your second best in class I think are Guan, Nebu, XY, William. We've been talking about you want to invest in marches, and pairings, but if you really just kind of plan around those commanders and creating marches from those commanders, I think you'll be in pretty good shape. I think a lot of players kind of have a tendency to work on commanders, right? They like slowly work on commanders over time, just because there are wheels coming, or MGs, or they get it in Heart's Desire or Legendary Tavern. The only thing that I want to stress is that just because you have heads invested into a commander doesn't mean that you have to continue investing in them. It's the sunk cost fallacy, where it's like, hey, I already have this commander at 5-5-3-1, might as well invest the rest of the heads, right? But that's really not the case. You're just going to end up ultimately wasting heads on a maybe a commander that's not going to be as useful and as relevant, when you could be taking those 200 heads and putting them into a commander that is going to be really good, and that is going to continue being good for you for a couple of years.
You definitely want to just invest in I feel like each commander has certain usability thresholds at certain skill levels, but if you're just slowly getting like each skill one by one, then it isn't really making your marches or your commander more usable. So I definitely agree that investing with a plan in mind. You don't have to do it the way Pro and I do it once a KVK, but have a plan and a direction in mind before you invest in your commanders. And yeah,